would like to introduce the keynote and workshop by the Interfaith Amigos called Finding Peace Through Spiritual Practice. Imam Jamal, Rahman, Pastor Don Mackenzie, my accents are all mixed up today, and Rabbi Ted Falcon, the Interfaith Amigos, started working together after 9/11. Since then, they have brought their unique blend of spiritual wisdom and humor to audiences all over the U.S., as well as Canada, Israel, Palestine, and Japan. When Pastor Don moved from Seattle to Minneapolis in 2013, the Amigos invited Pastor Dave Brown, a friend who leads Emmanuel Presbyterian Church in Tacoma, to substitute for him at many programs in the Northwest when travel from Minneapolis is not possible. Rabbi Ted, Imam Jamal, and Pastor Don present together as the Pacific Northwest Interfaith Amigos. Welcome, please.
They expected us to have a video, and we have no video. So you won't see it up there. I'm stunned with the energy of this place. I feel so deeply honored to be a part of this event and to be witness to the energies that you have shared. It's really about opening our hearts. And we have shared many words through these 2 days, and they've been important words. But words help us open the mind, and they're never enough. Because until we open the heart, those words never find the fertile field in which they can grow into compassionate action in the world. And the sounds you have shared and the energies you have shared have just helped translate all those words and opened our hearts. One of the problems is peace is not something we have to find. Peace is something we have to remember. We get so caught up in the dramas of our separate lives. We get so caught up in the contrast with which our minds operate. Our minds, our wonderful minds that help us survive in the world, can only know through contrast. We can only know up because we know down. We can only know soft because we know hard. We can only know easy because we know difficult. And we have this notion that with our minds we can create peace. But our minds can only know peace if we know war. If our minds only knew peace, we wouldn't even know it. So we're seeking peace in a place that can never truly know peace. And that's why the heart needs to open, and that's what spiritual practice is about. Spiritual practice is a way of finding the song within ourselves, finding that music that can open our hearts, reverberate to the very cells of our beings, and help us remember. In Jewish tradition, there are 3 levels of soul. The soul with which we walk the planet, the soul for which our mind is the voice, is called the nefesh. In Arabic, it's the nafs. And it's a wonderful soul. It's a necessary soul. But it's not the all of who we are. We have a mind, but so much of the time our mind has us. We have a body, but so much of the time our body has us, and we forget. We forget that there are dimensions of our own being that know the peace that we seek to remember into our world. The heart space in my tradition is called ruach. The heart space is the consciousness, the more inclusive consciousness that allows us to know unconditionality. What the ego wants most, what the nefesh wants most, is unconditional acceptance. Oh, God. What the ego wants most is to be loved exactly as it is, and the ego cannot do that. But the ruach can. The heart space, the consciousness of the heart, is love. That embrace that the ego yearns for is waiting to be met within each and every one of us. And in the Jewish idiom, there's a higher level of soul called neshama. And that's the level of soul that can't fit in the body. The body's too tight, the body's too limited. It's the more that connects us to the inclusivity of the greater identity that is mirrored through each and every one of us. One of my teachers is named Abraham Isaac Cook. He was the first chief rabbi of Palestine, died in 1935. He was one of these remarkable Orthodox rabbis who was at home even in a secular kibbutz. He wrote of his love for everyone. And the teaching of his that comes to mind through this music is the fourfold song. He taught that there's the person who sings the song of him or herself and sings that song so fully and so completely, and it's a beautiful thing. And then there's the person who sings the song of his or her people, of his or her tribe, of his or her culture, and sings that song with such fullness and such joy. And it's a beautiful thing. And then there's the person who sings the song of all people. Then there's the person who's able to sing the song of all humanity and to sing that song with such fullness and such heart. And it's a beautiful thing. And then there's the person who's able to sing the song of all life. Of all life. And to sing that song so fully, so openly, so completely, and so joyfully that it's a beautiful thing. And then there's the person who's able to enter into the harmony of each and every one of those songs. And that, I believe, is the music that is waiting to be sung through each and every one of us. It's to connect and express and celebrate the music of our individuality, the uniqueness that we bring to our world and to each other. And it's the willingness to sing and to celebrate the song of our people. And then it's to step into the song of all people. And in that song to know a connection that is so sure and so true that it can only be sung, it cannot be spoken. And at the same time, to sing the song of all life, to sing the song of a planet so strongly and so fully that we start naturally caring for this place. So I invite you to take a moment now. And if you feel comfortable, let your eyes close. And simply allow yourself to be aware of the song of your body. That song might express through perceptions, through sensations. That song expresses through the breath. And be aware of the song of your mind without trying to control it. Whatever song it's singing, let it sing. Whatever judgments, whatever thoughts, whatever memories, whatever yearnings, it's just the song of the mind, and it's your song. And you might become aware that you are observing the song of the mind, and you are observing the song of the body, but you are the witness. You are the witness of that incredible song, the song of the senses, the song of the thoughts, the song of the feelings. And in that witness space, you are able to embrace the song of the self. And you can allow yourself to move behind the witness to a place of greater inclusivity where you are able to embrace the song of your tribe, the song of your people, with all the dramas, all the celebrations, all the pains, all the promise, the chain of family. All the centuries of the journey of your people. And you are able to sense that song. And through that song, naturally, there is an expansion into a fuller inclusivity. And a deeper harmony emerges that you know is the song of all people. The song of all people. All the people who were, all the people who are, all the people who shall be. Oh, to step into that song, to celebrate that life. And when we sing the song of ourself, when we sing the song of our people, when we sing the song of all people, we suddenly realize we are singing the song of all life. Our hearts open. And we know we are connected, we are one, always. And we can allow that greater song to imbue the song of all people and the song of our people and the song of ourselves. And we can sing that song through compassionate actions in our world, through a love that awakens and embraces and celebrates and refuses to demonize and dehumanize. To say to ourselves, I love you. And to open our eyes and look around at each other and say, I love you. I love you. What a blessing to be here together.
That was Rabbi Ted. And I'm Pastor Don, and I could say what Ted said is enough, and I could sit down. But what I'm remembering this evening was a night back in 1984 when James Forbes came to the church I was serving in New Hampshire. And he got up to preach, He walked to the edge of the chancel and he said, "I've got a song to sing today." And the congregation was electrified, just as we have been tonight. And so ever since then, I've tried to say that to myself before I would get up and preach or do something like this. So I've got a song to sing. Thanks be to God, and thanks to you. I want to just spend a few moments on a text as an encouragement to meditation. And the text I'm going to read is from the 19th chapter of the Gospel according to Luke, verses 41 through 44. Listen for the word of God. As Jesus came near and saw Jerusalem, he wept over it, saying, "If you, even you, had only recognized on this day the things that make for peace. But now they are hidden from your eyes. Indeed, the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up ramparts around you and surround you and hem you in on every side. They will crush you to the ground, you and your children within you, and they will not leave you one stone standing upon another, because you did not recognize the time of your visitation from God." The other translation I like ends this way: "All because you did not recognize God's moment when it came." And so I'd like to say a few words about God's moment, and then give us a little bit of a chance to meditate. The word God, of course, is a word that points to something we cannot describe. But for the three of us, I would say it points to being itself, to the oneness of all of creation, a oneness which is made real in so many ways, but I would say singing, and singing together is one of the best incarnations of oneness. We are all a part of the one. We are all a part of each other. And so what I think this text says to me is that without spiritual practices, we cannot move toward peace and sustain ourselves doing it. Our third book, as Rabbi Ted mentioned, Finding Peace Through Spiritual Practice, suggests the necessity of spiritual practices to sustain activism, social and environmental activism. And so to me, this passage is about the need for peace, about the need for spiritual practices to sustain us on our way, and to, through the word God, remind us of our oneness in creation. So I invite you once again to close your eyes gently, to notice in the spirit of meditation, notice your breath coming in and out, and use the words God's moment as a focus phrase to recall yourself to your center, to the center of your being and being itself, as you meditate now just briefly for a few moments. Breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. recognizing God's moment. God's moment. All moments are God's. Now gently open your eyes. And as Rabbi Ted said, look around. And in recognizing that all moments are God's moments, recognizing the oneness of all of creation, recognize that we are all a part of the one. Thanks be to God.
And that was Pastor Don Mackenzie. I'm a Muslim, and I want to tell you, Muslims love music and singing. You have opened up my heart. You know, there's a wonderful story of this 13th century sage, Rumi. He was sitting with his circle, and they were singing, praising God, praising God, praising God. And there was a very conservative, rigid Muslim there who said, what is all this singing, 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 music, music? And Rumi said, brother, music and singing is the sound of the creaking of the doors of paradise. And immediately this conservative Muslim said, I hate the sound of creaking. And Rumi said, brother, that's because for you, when you hear that sound of creaking, the doors of paradise are closing. Brother Mackenzie mentioned the need for spiritual practices. You know, this morning I was talking to a friend about a wonderful Islamic insight that sometimes we're looking among the leaves and branches for what appears in the roots. In this conference, we have really tackled what appears in the roots. But I want to say, one important root is, as Brother Don Mackenzie and my rabbi friend also mentioned, the need for spiritual practices. You know, I was in a presentation in University of Washington, and the professor explained racism. He said, did you know that every 28 hours, an African American is being killed by state-sponsored violence? We were shocked. But he said, that's not the real problem. The real problem is that African American is being murdered 1 billion times a day by the stereotyping thoughts we have in our mind. They are violent people. They are a drain on the economy. Unless we are able to change that, no matter what legislation we do, no matter what injunctions, it will not create a structural change. And that's when he said, we desperately need for each one of us to be doing spiritual practices, for each one of us to become aware of our prejudices. For me, against whites, against rich people, for all of us. What is my prejudice? I'm going to another subject about environment. We love to quote this fantastic advisor to the White House who said, and he's an expert on the environment. He says, I used to think that the greatest environmental problems are loss of biodiversity, climate change, ecosystem collapse. But he says, now I have, and he said, I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could solve these problems. He says, now I've realized the biggest environmental problems are greed, selfishness, and apathy. And he says, we scientists cannot solve that. It'll require people to be spiritual. We need spiritual practices. I love this Sufi story, which has gone all over the world. It actually was started by that beloved female sage, Rabia. Heard of Rabia? 8th, 9th century. Wonderful female saint, they say. She was trying so hard to impart a teaching. So in the 8th century, no electricity, under a pillar of fire, she's looking for a lost key. The entire village joins her to look for the lost key. They cannot find the key. So they say, Rabia, Sister Rabia, can you kind of tell us whereabouts you might have dropped it so we may better direct our search? She says, actually, I didn't lose it here. I lost it miles away in my house over there. She said, really, why are you looking for it here? She says, simple, my house has no light at all. There's so much more light out here. So everybody laughs. She says, you have laughed, which tells me you're intelligent people. But now you tell me, when you have lost your peace of mind, your happiness, because of a failed relationship out there, about a project that did not transpire, and you spend all your time fixing this, fixing that, and that is so important, but did you lose it out there? Or did you lose it inside here? But it's so much more dim and so much more inconvenient to look at it inside here. Just a few other words I want to say. I love meditation, but I also love this sacred practice of sacred laughter. All the sages say, in laughter, you find the essence of truth. The 14th century sage Hafiz says, what is this love and laughter bubbling up from within me? He says, listen to my answer. It's the sound of a soul waking up. So in Islamic spirituality, we have many stories that help you to look at yourself and laugh at yourself in a very loving, compassionate way, and that, by grace of God, will bring about a shift. Brother Ted mentioned the ego. It's a very famous Sufi story. One moonlit night, the mullah, he's taking a walk. He happens to pass by a well. He looks inside the well. He's horrified. Why? Because the moon has fallen into the well. Sister Moon, fear not. He runs home, gets a rope and a hook. He throws it down there. It probably catches something. He heaves and pulls and pushes, and something loosens. He falls on his back and finds the moon restored to its proper domain. And he says, thank God I came along. Another story, quick one, to talk about how we are so slavishly dependent on authorities and experts and pundits. We know this from the election. We're not using critical thinking. So here's a story. The mullah is deathly ill. His wife is wailing and crying, and now in comes the expert, the allopathic doctor, who examines the mullah at length and then turns to the mullah's wife and says, oh, honorable wife of the mullah, only Allah is immortal. your husband has died. His soul has flown to the bosom of God. But the mullah is not dead. He's feebly saying, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive. What does the wife say? Quiet, don't argue with the doctor. One last one, we always say, the three of us. The mullah goes to work, opens his lunch pail box. What does he find? A cheese sandwich.
Second day, third day, fourth day, opens his lunch, another lousy cheese sandwich.
Finally, his puzzled co-workers say, Mullah, why don't you go home and ask your wife to make a different kind of sandwich?
I'm not married. Who makes them? I do. This is all by saying that one of the greatest spiritual practices Prophet Muhammad said is, peace be upon him, he said, know thyself, and you shall know thy sustainer. It's in every tradition. See, the Buddha said, if you know others, you become wise. Know yourself, you become enlightened. Prophet Muhammad said, die before you die. Die to your false ego before you die a physical death. In the Quran, the heart is mentioned 132 times. Open your heart, open your heart, open your heart. So I want to end with this saying of Prophet Muhammad, who said, Jamal, when you arrived here from the invisible world, everybody around you was laughing and smiling, but you were crying and crying and crying. Live such a life, Jamal, that when you depart for the invisible world, everybody around you is crying and weeping, but you are laughing and smiling. Thank you so much.